With a federal crackdown underway, the Spokane City Council fast-tracked a vote Monday to reaffirm state law restricting how much local law enforcement can participate with immigration authorities. Here with more on this story is Center Square's Eastern Washington reporter Tim Clouser. Tim, the City Council meeting earlier this week was eventful to say the least. Walk us through it.
Yeah, so the council amended their Monday meeting agenda just hours before to vote on a resolution that essentially reaffirms state law, and that law is the Keep Washington Working Act. Now, the state legislature passed this in 2019 essentially to respect the dignity of its immigrant population and refugees living in the state. Now, the time when they passed this, I have the data right in front of me. It says that there's roughly 1 million immigrants living in the state at the time, which is about 1 in 7 people. And that comprises about 16% of the state's workforce and 15% of all business owners. Now, the numbers are a little bit different in Spokane, but it's still quite a bit of people. So with President Donald Trump's executive orders, especially around illegal immigration and these mass deportations, the council decided that it needed to fast track this vote, essentially to reaffirm these dignities for the local population. There was some back and forth over whether they should have done this because they weren't supposed to vote until February 24th. So the council's minority was concerned that it was going to limit the amount of people that were able to testify, whether for or against the resolution, which could have been true. But when it came down to it, hundreds of people showed up to that city council meeting with dozens signed up to testify on that item. So many people were there that the council president had to actually pause the meeting because a fire marshal had told them that due to the building being over capacity, they either had to tell people to leave or they had to take the meeting elsewhere. So there was a lot of spirited testimony, a lot of back and forth over whether the city should even be dipping their hands in this because with resolutions, they're non-binding. They don't change the law. They're essentially making a statement. So there was some back and forth between the community and council on this, but they ultimately passed it with a vote of 5-2 with 2 minority members dissenting.
Let's get into some of that back and forth. What was some of the testimony offered for and against?
Yeah, so a lot of the testimony for was just saying, look, immigration, regardless of its current status, shouldn't be a crime. It focused on instances where people in the Spokane region have been stopped, whether they're legal or not. Now, Washington's Keep Washington Working Act essentially prevents local law enforcement from participating largely with federal immigration authorities. So this means that they can't ask about a person's citizenship, I believe, unless it directly relates to a crime that they've witnessed the person committing. But it also means that ICE and Border Patrol can't come in and ask for the sheriff or the police department's help. Now, the testimony in support of this was saying, look, we shouldn't be putting local resources towards this, especially when a lot of these people are paying taxes in some instances and aren't nefarious criminals. Now, the testimony against it pushed back and said, look, there might be a large majority of these people that aren't criminals, but a small amount are, and they've committed heinous acts and they deserve to be deported for that. Now, there's a lot of back and forth on that and the legitimacy of it. But when it came down to it, the people against the ordinance want the law to be enforced. And whether or not people see illegal immigration as a crime, federally it is a crime. It's illegal to cross the border. And if you do it more than once, you can be charged with a felony. So whether or not people want to criminalize immigration, there is a criminal aspect to it if you don't do it correctly.
And how could this potentially affect some of Spokane's funding?
Yeah, so that's a little unclear at this point. Now, Mayor Lisa Brown, she told the council recently that look, between all of Trump's executive orders at that point in time, it put 48 million at risk in federal funding for the city and its partners. Now, that's at risk. That's not guaranteed. There's a few million that they for sure have lost for the time being, but that's on the table. Now, the U.S. Department of Justice sent out a memo at the beginning of February saying, look, anyone who interferes with federal law enforcement activities shouldn't receive any DOJ funding. Now, the DOJ gives a lot of funding to police departments, sheriffs, and other organizations. So Washington and Spokane isn't essentially interfering with DOJ or federal law enforcement activity with this resolution, as it reaffirms state law and just says that they won't get involved. But the resolution sends a statement, and the council's minority said that. They said, look, ICE doesn't care about our resolution. They're going to come in and do what they want, whether or not we cooperate. And they took this statement even further when Councilmember Paul Dillon, he actually showed the memo for everyone to see during the council meeting and ripped it up and called it an empty scare tactic. Now, again, it's not interfering with federal law enforcement activities, but it does send a statement, and the council split between the minority and the progressive majority on whether or not they want to send that statement. But regardless, that statement was sent last night. Or not last
Yes.
night, sorry, earlier this week.
Yeah, it's definitely not a friendly relationship at the very least.
Contentious, I would say.
Well, Tim, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.